If you're an Enhancement Shaman, you've just learned that basically
You are listening to Conversations with Yoube, a podcast produced by bisnation.net members.
I feel like we could have some fun just playing around with shit like that.
Yep.
Alright, let's try and shift into, I don't want to say serious, because it's never fun if we're super serious.
That's right.
But the amount of shenanigans and tangents, I think we worked our way up to around 46.
Yeah.
Let's try and direct all of that energy into one thing. So I just popped my Ritalin, and I took an Alpha Brain. Hopefully you had some coffee or some chai tea or...
No, I can't afford to be up that night.
But no, the reason we're doing, I asked you if you could get up tonight to do this is there was an interesting tweet that came our way this morning by way of, I'll never be able to pronounce this name, ever. There are too many vowels for me to actually be able to do so, but I will try.
It's like extra cool.
Poekal Satin. And what she did was basically retweet Kilroy, where he said, "Good morning Twitter time." Or, "Good morning Twitter, time for the morning wood." And that's WOULD for all of you out there with your heads in another place, aka Rise.
Thank you.
If you were in charge of Warcraft PvP, how would you make it better? I thought, considering that we've touched on that in, half of the podcast we've done?
Yeah.
This would be a good opportunity or sort of an impetus for us to actually sort of condense those thoughts into one cast. And I know we're not going to be able to touch on everything because no one wants to listen to us talk for the next week straight. But where do you think a good starting point would be?
A good starting point. Tell you what, let's start with what works. I think that one of the big things people like to complain about in WoW, and legitimately so, are a lot of the details of what makes the game either more difficult or opaque or tough to do. There's a lot of problems, and I put that in air quotes, with WoW PvP, precisely because there are things about WoW that work so well that when you contrast that with the stuff that doesn't work, it's really frustrating. So let's start with what does work. And what does work is the control. The number one reason I see people come back to WoW after they've played some other MMO, they'll talk about better graphics in other games. They'll talk about more class diversity. They'll talk about details. But for whatever reason, they'll spend some time there and then they'll come back to WoW. And for people who love to PvP, they always tell me, you can always do more in WoW. And when they tell me that, I'm like, what do you mean you can do more? Like there's actually WoW's bigger? Like, no. What I'm saying is, they tell me that if you want to do something like have a focus target, or set up macros to be able to chain abilities, or to be able to even do something as simple as develop your own key bindings so that your flow on your keyboard and your mouse, your particular keyboard and mouse, which may be different from the next person's, you can customize WoW's interface, hardware interface, to an amazing degree. You can really make your characters respond the way that you do, that you want to do that. That is one of the strongest points about WoW that I've seen compared to any other game. And I mention that because one of the most frustrating points is if you really want to make the most out of what WoW offers as far as the interface goes, you've got to learn to freaking code. I'm like, really? Slash macros? Give us, one of the best things WoW could do is find an itinerant way for us to be able to do key bindings beside this huge scrolling list that you go to through escape, interface, key bindings, whatever that pattern is.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Oh
like
my
if
God.
You're just trying to teach someone how to interact over mouse over target to scroll wheel.
I was just about to go there. Seriously. That should be this.
What you do is you spend 10 minutes cycling through.
That's the hardest part.
All of that. And you're gonna go by it like 6 times.
Yeah, 6 times.
And then scroll back up for another 20 seconds, scroll down for 15, scroll up for 7, scroll down for 3, and then about 1 to 2 mouse wheel turns either directions, you'll see it. And then you just click on that, and then you push the mouse wheel, whichever way you got.
That's right. And let's take the phrase, interact with mouse over. Tell me anywhere in that phrase where it would be obvious that that's where you do scroll clicking. That makes any sense whatsoever. Interact with mouse over? So I'm putting my mouse over something and then I interact with it. Does that mean if I swizzle my mouse on the screen over something, it does it by itself? And the answer is no. It doesn't do a damn thing. There's actually interact with mouse over. Mouse over has nothing to do with it. It just happens to be the position of the mouse. There's no indication that you actually have to give a command.
And also it's, when you use that phrase, interact with mouse over, let's just sort of take it in context. If I put my mouse over something, it will interact.
Yeah.
It's like, but I put my mouse over everything I want to interact with.
Right.
I don't know if I want to bind that to that.
Like, does that mean if I want to play this game, I have to hold down the J key the whole time? Maybe I should just put my W key in like my forward run all the time because I don't want to stop interacting. But wait, I was playing this game this entire time without having it interact. It just doesn't make any sense. Blizzard, if you can go in and iconorate these things, some of the stuff you have to use phrases for, but to be able to use pictures for stuff, to be able to put together a pictorial language, so to speak, as opposed to having us type
So it's like
code.
What you see is what you get sort of thing as far as building macros go. So say, focus, we'll just say it has a big F. And
I wouldn't even use a letter. Don't even use letters that could be alphabet so that you can make this so you can use it in China and in Serbia and anywhere else they could possibly have this game. Make it so that it's a big red circle and then you put something in the circle. That's your focus, that's easy. Make it Lego intuitive. Lego instructions have no words anywhere in the world.
And a quick tangent. Speaking of Legos, they just came out with a Lego Simpsons set. Just saying.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Back to the macros and stuff. Yeah, to make it, say, more picture-based, have something, say, your target. Have it literally be a bullseye.
Yeah, I make it be a bullseye. If you want to make a target one of your teammates, one of the players in your party, player 1, player 2, or party 1, party 2, as the macro parlance goes, fine, have a hash mark or a double hash mark over the target.
But have it be if you see the people in the gun range and they're firing, instead of seeing the big alien pop out in Men of Black, you see the mom holding the baby.
So, genius like that is what it's going to take to refine these intuitive things you can do to be able to make key bindings and macros much more accessible. And like anything in WoW, keep it accessible for under the hood. If you want to get in there and code, you can. But for everything else, if you want... The biggest problem in WoW, and we're going to get into a bunch of these things, but the biggest overarching theme that I see is that you can do so much in this game, but it's not obvious. There's nothing that tells you. And unless you run into somebody else that tells you how to do that, you will never know. You will never know there is such a thing as scroll clicking unless you spend an immense amount of time scrolling through that crazy list and experimenting, or, more likely, after the 20th time someone has stolen out a flag from out from under you.
And you start to ask questions.
Like, what the hell's going on?
And I never, if it wasn't for playing in XP off brackets, I would have no clue what scroll clicking is. I would just think that this person has a mutant ability to obtain the flag at a rate that it blows mine out of the water. Cause I'm sitting there, I'm like, going mad, just hitting the mouse, like, it's mine. Wait, that dude's 10 feet behind me, and he got the flag. Something is not jiving.
Yeah, you're sitting there going, on your button, you've let go of your keyboard, you've got both fingers tap dancing on the button, and you've got that mouse held down, and they still take the flag from you.
Right. And we're using one example to illustrate a greater point, which Raz sort of touched on too, that it's just not that intuitive, and you really have to dive in and go out of your way to learn how these things work. Something that, to people that know how to, it's real simple. You just scroll down, mouse wheel to interact. You're good. You're going to get the flag unless someone just has a mouse that's ridiculously sensitive and the wheel will spin independently for an extra 2 seconds. You're fine.
So that's one of the big overarching themes I see. And I think we can get into a lot of sub-things that I'd like to see as a result of that kind of approach. One of the things they announced for Warlords of Draenor is that Blizzard's going to make some user interface improvements on the field. That's going to be a huge help. We've needed that for a long time. You want better PvP? Don't have to make the player dig for things like showing cast bars. Or even if you're playing PvP right now and you don't have plate buffs or tidy plates or something like that, unless you're a top grade player, you're really doing yourself a disservice. To not know that the person next to you is in some sort of stun that because you just happened to miss that little swirly thing above their head, or to know that the animal next to you is a sheep that's an actual player as opposed to a pet that a hunter pulled out. It's like, these things make a difference in both the short and the long term. But as a player trying to learn this game, you'll miss that time and time again.
No, and I think you said a good thing with the little swirly thing over your head. How many times have you been in a BG, and for us this is especially poignant because we play healers, that you're running up, say, to do an offensive push, and everyone leaves you, you're sapped. And they just keep going, everything's right as rain, you're like, awesome, we got a healer with us this time, we're gonna do some work, that FC is going down, and then you're typing out, hey man, I got sapped, sorry I wasn't there to heal you, and that's followed by a split second later, where was the healer, why are you so bad, why didn't you heal us? It's like, well, I was sapped, did you not notice? And there's of course add-ons like Say Sapped, which are fantastic and I highly suggest people get.
Yeah.
But more to your point, that's something that Blizzard should adopt and possibly actually I don't know if I want to say they should adopt that, because I feel like something like Sapped, that should be sort of your awareness. I keep taking HB's word now. On the field.
Own it.
Yeah. But also playing to your thing where Blizzard is going to be changing the UI to making it more informative and user-friendly in Battlegrounds. They're going to basically, from what I understand, almost taking the capping add-on and putting it into the standard interface, where you will see enemy flag carriers, you'll see the time to cap a node.
I can't wait.
Right there, I mean, can you think about how much that will just help people that don't have those add-ons or aren't sure where to find them or that they even exist? They don't have to go out and search anymore. That's all going to be standard to their PvP experience.
There was a time years ago when if you were a raider, if you were playing WoW in general, but especially if you were a raider, then you needed an add-on, and I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but it was an add-on that measured threat. You needed to know as a tank,
Omni.
As Omni, that's what it was. Thank you, Omni. As a tank, as a healer, and especially as a DPS, because it was a lot harder to hold threat back then, when you were going to surpass the threat threshold of a mob. That was a huge deal, and there was a very clear distinction for a long time between, frankly, players who used the add-on and players who didn't. It was that clear.
Because I used to play a mage, and not that I ever really did any hardcore raiding or anything, but I'd run around with some people at the time and just kind of fill in gaps as necessary. And for the first few, maybe dozen times, my one buddy that was a tank is like, dude, you have got to stop pulling threat like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, my DPS is off the charts. How can you be angry with me right now? And then I actually stopped to think about it, realized the mechanic that's vitally important to the way PvE battles function. I was, crap. Got Omni. I figured out what a focus target is, or target of target is, and then realized, wait, I can just hit invis. That's basically a threat dump. And you work that into the rotation. But those are all still things that, especially with the threat, like learning the rotation and the threat dump, that's something that should be player-based. But as far as threat levels go, how the hell is anyone going to know that without a number?
How are they going to know? And kudos to Blizz, they made that part of the basic interface. That's something that Blizz is pretty good at. It can take a while, but when they see something that everybody uses and they think they can pull it off in a way that makes it worthwhile for everyone or pretty close to it, they go after it. So that's, to go back to the original question of how do you make PvP better, paying attention to those kinds of details of exposing the parts of the game that players need to pay attention to, that is a major theme also running through what we can do to improve PvP. That's going to happen in the user interface. The next one that's going to happen really nicely, they're going to make some, what I hope are some evolutionary scoreboard changes. We have needed that for a long time coming.
Rise, for last Sunday, since it was the New Year's, I decided to post one of my favorite podcasts that we had done. And it was the wish list for Santa Blizzard. I think it was either the first or one of the first of these conversations with Yoube that we had done. And one of them was changing that goddamn scoreboard to more accurately reflect the contributions given by said person in a battleground.
A lot of people like to give players grief for being idiots, like saying, oh, you don't play objectives, you don't do this, you tunnel vision that, and so forth. There is some truth to that, but let's be honest with ourselves. When the game itself encourages poor behavior, we really don't have that much room to complain. Yes, there is a hump to get over to understand there's better ways to do things, but we're not talking people who've reached the top 2% of PvP. We're talking people who are still learning this game. And we forget this, it takes a long time to learn these intricacies, not because they're hard, but because they're not intuitive. Changing the scoreboard to expose things like it is important to bubble people, it is important to interrupt people, it is important to CC people, it is important to purge people. Being able to add, and I don't know which elements they're going to include, those are the kinds of things that will make a general sweeping difference to helping players learn how to play this game.
But something else you were saying before with things that Blizzard has done right. I'm going to look ahead and say something that it seems like Blizzard is doing right. And we talked about this in a podcast not too long ago, where you mentioned how the mysterious, magical, we shall not speak the name of modifier of certain abilities is being removed. And right now as it stands, if you're a warrior, a hunter, a shadow priest, to a lesser extent a rogue, you can go through multiple levels and completely ignore the fact that you have any ability other than, say, shield slam, explosive shot, ambush, or mind blast. You don't need to think about all the CCs at your disposal. If you're a priest, that you can actually off-heal and do it quite effectively with how ridiculously OP bubbles are at lower levels. It just doesn't matter. You can focus on the DPS to high amounts of success, directly correlating to that scoreboard that shows up at the end of a game, and then all of a sudden things change and what just happened? I didn't change. I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Why all of a sudden am I getting worked by this chamois that's frost-shocking me, kiting? What is all this nonsense? I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah. No one told me this was going to come up. When did this ever happen? I remember last week, we're playing threes. I haven't played threes in a long time. This is endgame threes. We're all 90s, and a red paladin, enhancement shaman, and I want to say it was a Mistweaver monk come in.
Holla to the Mistweaver right there.
It was a motley crew. I'm like, where, an enhancement shaman? I mean, I think of enhancement shaman, if you're playing right now in anything but endgame, enhancement shamans are just crying. Like, there's just,
except maybe
85.
85 bracket.
Yeah, 85.
So you get some fun loots in there,
yeah.
You might be okay.
There you go. So there's exceptions.
But that's another issue that we may or may not get to later.
Fair enough. But I mean, if you're an enhancement shaman, you've just learned that you're just a masochist, because basically you've sucked for pretty much your entire level experience. When you get your stuff right as an enhancement shaman in endgame, you do some work. You do some serious work. And more importantly, people don't know how to deal with you, because you come out of nowhere. It's like enhancement shamans always sucked. I never had to worry about them before. Now all of a sudden, they are blowing stuff up. They are keeping you in range with all kinds of slows. They're popping ascendants and taking off limbs. It's just amazing what they can do. How do you deal with that as a player? And it's a two-sided answer of players who are like, I just came out of nowhere, I don't know how to deal against this. And the players who are enhancement shamans are like, I had to sit down and figure this all out because everything I knew for the last 89 levels was wrong. That's hard. So to finally be able to get some of that straightened out would be really, really nice. I'm looking forward to seeing if WoD can pull that off.
Well, it's interesting that Blizzard has taken the approach where we're just going to kind of ignore the lower levels of our game. We're going to focus on end game because that's basically where the bread and butter is. You play this game to get to, at this point, 90, right?
Yeah.
You get there so you can do your rated arenas, you can do your raids, you can do your RBGs, or all the other cool things, Timeless Isle, whatever they have going for you, challenge modes and all that. But in doing so, they've kind of ignored the fact that there's a lot of things to learn along the way to 90.
Yeah.
You don't just get to 90 and it's, oh, you magically know how to play.
And 90 is a tough spot to start from, to figure that out from scratch. That's one of the differences between what this game was like years ago. And I want to be clear about this. I'm not sure I would wish that experience on people. When I went to do my tallies for how long it took to level a 29 for the first time versus what it took now, I can put together, as in fully gear up at 29, within probably a matter of I'm pretty slow at leveling and just slow overall. So it might take me a good 24 hours. You can easily add...
But those 24 hours would net you like 8 levels.
Seriously, you could put an extra 0 easily on the end of that for the first 29 I made of that. And that wasn't because I was that much worse, although I was. It was because it took so much more XP per level. It took so much more work to get particular pieces of gear. There was so much more involved. So what that meant is you had a lot more time to play with the new ability, to really figure out, where does this work in my rotation? It's kind of weird to call this vestigial, but you'll see people when they hit a level in a dungeon say ding. And I think a lot of new players don't know where that came from. They don't realize, like, why would you, okay, ding, so you got a
wow,
level
I never
root.
even thought of that. Getting a level now is so...
It happens in an
no
hour.
shit. I'll get 2 levels as I run through RFC.
It's true,
It
in
used
the
to
same
be,
instance.
Oh, grats, you actually got a level. You spent a day on level 30.
A day on it, and by a day, I mean 24 hours. There was a time people, if they were burning hard, might level once a week. So when you witnessed that flash of light around a guildie or someone you were running with, and they said ding, it was a cause for celebration. Because that level took hours of work. I mean like, congratulations, you made it to level 36. That level took hours to get to. That's what ding used to mean.
Are you ready to go down analogy lane?
Analogy lane, what you got?
Alright, we'll see if it works. It's probably not going to, but we'll see what happens. So we're talking about how WoW used to be and how WoW is now. And that WoW is basically all end game. We want to get you to end game as fast as possible. Everything else be damned. We give tanks these ridiculously overpowered moves that are great from a PvE standpoint to get you to 90 as quick as possible. Because you can be a pally. I don't even know if you need a healer as a prot pally for like the first 40 levels.
I'm not sure you need a tank either.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. As a R-Sham, and you can attest to this, you can probably tank the first, 15 to 30 dungeons. And you're fine.
Yeah.
As long as you have some remotely capable DPS. And R-Sham, I would say, is one of the weaker healers at lower levels. So they're going through, everyone wants to get to 90. That's awesome. We want to get there too. It's where all the fun stuff's happening.
Where the party is.
But in doing so, you're neglecting that foundation or that base that's built through that process.
Yeah.
So since I said we're going to go analogy, we're going to use Steve the Contractor.
Okay.
Alright? So we have Steve the Contractor. And Steve the Contractor grew up in a 1-story house. So Steve the Contractor was doing his business. He was working super hard, learning all the tricks of the trade. And eventually, Bob the Builder, who had a much larger business, decided to buy Steve the Contractor out. And with that came this huge windfall. And with this windfall, Steve decided he wanted to build a 2-story house. But since he had lived in a 1-story house all his life, he said, you know what? I could give a shit less about that first floor. Here's a few, 2x4s. Here's a couple sheets of drywall. All I want you to do is make sure that you can get a second floor on that bitch. So like, are you sure? 'Cause I don't think a 2x4 or 4 is gonna keep up that second floor. What do you plan on putting up there? He's like, oh, you guys are gonna love this. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna have a room of nothing but pillows. It's all pillows. And there'll be a screen that drops down. We can go in there and watch movies. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna have a bowling alley, a little hot tub room. He's like, and I'm gonna have a froyo stand in there. That's right, a froyo stand. They're like, Steve, that sounds great, but you realize what you're building this on is equivalent to toothpicks holding up a fifth of Jaeger. He's like, yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So he gets the house built. He's up there. He's having a great time. And then he decides to have a party. And so he has like 20, 30 friends. They roll some kegs in. About 5 hours into the party, those 2x4s crack. And they are right back down on the first floor, and they have no idea what to do with themselves. They don't know how to handle it. They're just basically confused as all F because they thought they knew what they were doing. They're like, dude, we got that second floor. We got all the fun stuff we wanted. Why can't we use it properly? Why can't we enjoy it the way that I had it built up in my mind and all of the plans I drew up had promised? And this might be a stretch, but let's look at that from a Blizzard point of view. Blizzard, as we were talking about before, and we definitely don't want to go back to the point where you're spending literally days on a level. It does no one good at this point. There are 90 of those things that you have to go through.
Yeah.
But if there isn't some sort of balance met, that as you're going through and building your foundation as a player, building that foundation through each of the abilities that you learn through each level and how to use them. And this really comes to play into PvP, I think, much more so than PvE. Because in PvE, a healer can get by without using interrupts for the most part. Because all of the DPS is going to have an interrupt at this point too. Something that may not have been necessarily true several expansions ago. Every healer is going to basically be able to dispel whatever, if it's even needed at this point. But in PvP, you damn well better know how to use that interrupt, how to use it effectively. You really need to know how to work on your positioning. As I say, let's use Chamois Rise, since that's our thing. Mm-hmm. Each of those totems, they do something very important. And there's a very specific time and place for each of them to happen. And it is not predetermined. It's not, alright, listen, we're going to hit the rage timer here. He's going to go to phase 3 or 2 here. You're going to be dropping a green ring at this point. You're going to use totemic projection to throw it 20 feet away from you so you can still at range. All of that has to happen on the fly in a PvP setting. And if you're going through and none of that matters through the first, I wouldn't even go all the way to 9. Let's just say the first 80 levels, even though if we're being honest, it gets even more exaggerated once you hit 80. Yeah. Once you get the scaling inflation, the stat inflation, and let's not even get into the new enchant ridiculousness. That foundation, you have 5 tons of fun sitting on 4 2x4s. I don't understand how you can expect all that time and effort that you spent to come out the way you thought when you basically kicked everything else under the rug and said, yeah, just make it look from the outside as though it will be sufficient to hold up what we're trying to get you to do or where we're trying to get you to go.
As bizarre as that was, I think it's dead on accurate. And here's the thing, that second floor that's fallen down to the first is still an awesome looking floor.
Yeah.
There are incredible experiences still to be had in this game. There's no doubt about that. But there's a much, I don't even think steep isn't even the right term for learning curve. It's not, it's a cliff. It's a jag. You have to spend an unbelievable amount of time, or more likely, somebody or a bunch of somebodies have to spend a whole lot of time with you to train you up to figure stuff out, because, and that's how it used to be anyway, but it was so much more spread out and expectations were so much more casual back then as far as being able to do stuff. It wasn't that big a deal. Now, Blamo, you show up on 90's door in the matter of a few days, and then come next expansion, you will buy your way into showing up on 90's door.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to know how to do anything?
You'd have one brick, you put another brick on it, you put another brick on it, and eventually you get to the end, but you're aware of each brick that you place, for the most part.
For the most part. But here's the thing, it was the foundation. That was how you laid the foundation. You would later choose your second floor. And players did it differently and argued incessantly about different ways to go about doing that, and that was half the fun of the game right there. Now, most players just don't even know. And when I say most players, especially as things have changed in the game, there's so much to know and no obvious way to learn it. That is a real problem.
And it's weird because what we talk about is normally around XP off. But in all honesty, it's much larger than that.
It is much larger than that.
In the things that the XP off brackets experience, it's not unique to us. It's like a microcosm of what's actually going on in the game, but we experience on a much deeper and more significant level because we get it every time we queue into a game.
That's right.
It doesn't just go away when you hit level 40 or when you hit level 30, you hit level 20. They're constant. It's reinforced. Blizzard has allowed the game to just become ridiculous at low levels to the point that they just buffed hunters by 10% with Aspect of the Hawk. Now, I'm sure that had some endgame implications. I can't imagine why else they would do it. But I just got out of a couple 39 games before this started, and let me tell you, the last thing on earth a hunter needed was a damage buff. You're not reinforcing quality PvP or helping people learn how to play when they're either A, killing someone in 3 or 4 globals, or B, that person is dying in 3 or 4 globals. And we're talking XP off, so you have, this isn't this great disparity in gear level. Everyone's geared within a few percent, basically similar. So just imagine how that trickles down into XP on, where you have people leveling and trying to learn PvP. Why would you even deal with that?
Why would you set up that situation in the first place? Let me ask, tell you what, one of the things that Chops always says, and I believe it 100%, is that Twinks in the game are a missed opportunity for Blizzard to be able to call upon a resource and really fine-tune some areas that help the entire game. In a nutshell, Twinking is simply min-maxing at a particular level. If you're at endgame and you are min-maxing, you're essentially twinking.
You're an endgame twink.
You're an endgame twink. That's what it is. Twinking just happens to happen at other places besides endgame.
You know what's something funny? I'm going to cut you off for 1 second, and I apologize. But if you think about it, people who are fully geared for the current season, playing in a random BG with people that aren't fully geared for that random season, are basically the 20 free-to-play trials that have no idea they're actually on a free-to-play and you can gear up your tune, versus the 24s who are fully aware, and it's on.
Yeah, absolutely. That, I don't think that's a stretch at all. I think that's spot on. And Blizzard takes a look at that, and this isn't just for parts of WoW, this is for all of WoW. When they look at endgame, they find the players that push the boundaries, that do what they can with this game to really excel in PvE, to really excel in PvP, and really work on the nuances and details to get things balanced as best they can. It's been a real tough run for them lately. There's things that work, there's things that don't, but they put that kind of attention in there for the players who really push things at endgame, because they know if they can get things pretty well balanced for them, it should pretty much, there's going to be high points and low points for the players working to get there, but you balance for the top, and then you let the rest go down. Because at the top end of your game, if everybody knows these 3 or 4 classes are by far the best, then people aren't going to even mess with the other 7 or 8 classes you spent your gazillions of hours and dollars of resources to include in your game. So they aim for the top when they balance endgame. Why wouldn't you aim for the top of every bracket? Why wouldn't you take a pittance of those resources and check out 39s and be like, alright, so if endgame min-maxes, if they're twinking at endgame and come out with these results, what happens when they do that 39? And the answer is, just saying there might be some disparities you might want to check out there, because if it affects Twinks, if Twinks can show the massive disparities between classes, between gear availability, you pick whatever it is, then the players leveling through who are not aware of the disparities, all they know is something is off, you fix it for the Twinks, you'll fix it for the levelers as well. And then everybody gets a smoother experience, whether you want to play XP off, or whether you're in the vast majority that are simply leveling through. Everybody wins. That's why you pay attention to twinking in this game.
In the way it's currently set up, it gives people leveling the illusion that Twinks are in games with them.
Yeah.
But that's simply, alright, caveat, there are going to be some people who exploit the XP on, XP off glitch. But that is such a minuscule percentage of the player base. I mean, we're talking like, what, 0.01 of people that you're going to get into a BG with will be doing that. What people think are Twinks now, they're not Twinks. They're just people playing warriors in BOAs. What you used to think are Twinks are now in XP off brackets. And so there's this whole other paradigm that people aren't even willing to accept that, wait, the Twinks are doing what they want to do. They're actually now XP off players. They're not Twinks anymore. What you're dealing with in the leveling experience, 99.01% of the time, those are just dudes playing the class that Blizzard built with the gear that Blizzard gave them.
Yeah. And we're not even talking all the gear. We're talking just the BOAs. And that's a big just. I'm not going to doubt that. There's definitely, I mean, that's the majority of your gear. But for both gear and skill reasons, there's still a gap between these people who are blowing up leveling Battlegrounds and people who are playing XP off. But here's the thing. Whether you die in a global to a quote-unquote true twink, or whether you die in a global to somebody who is just a BOA gear leveler, or whether you die in a global to somebody who's half geared but happens to have an amazing class advantage at that particular level, you die in a global. And when you die in a global, you learn nothing.
Wait, you're telling me that if you have no chance to react, no chance to even understand what happened to you, that's not a learning experience?
Let me tell you one of the best things that Blizzard could do to help PvP. And this goes back to a good 4 or 5 years ago. We've made a lot of progress in this game for having things develop. There's a lot of positive things here. But when you see people complain on the forums about there being too many CCs or too many instants, and there's not enough casting, you'll see people talk about, well, that mana doesn't mean anything anymore, even though focus for hunters and energy for rogues still does. You'll see people talk about different balance issues between characters. If you rewind to 4 or 5 years ago, one of the features back then, regardless of how much gear you had or didn't have, was that fights lasted a lot longer. And it wasn't just beating people down where it's like I just took longer to kill them. It wasn't like that. When you had fights that lasted a good 50, 60, 70 seconds, they went through phases. And characters actually had strengths and weaknesses throughout the phases of a fight. I'm talking mostly Battlegrounds right now, but this also applied to World PvP. It applied to duels. It applied to arenas. These are all different venues of PvP. But there were phases of a fight where when you first started the engagement, your casters were probably stronger because they could hit from a distance and melee had to chase them. And then they ran out of mana, so the melee were on top for a while, and they were the ones that were peeling and kiting and helping out. And maybe your healers were keeping one up or making hard choices between do I heal this person or purge that person. Maybe there was comp issues. Maybe you had to choose between who lived and who died. Maybe you figured the fight's going to last for 30 more seconds, so I'll break off and drink for 20 of those seconds so I can join the fight and extend it another 5 seconds for my team. These are decisions you made throughout the entirety of one battle. And it wasn't that the battle was slower and more boring. The battle was still as high-pitched as it was before. But you slowly watched the health bars or the mana bars, and sometimes quickly as far as mana went, you watch these bars go down and maybe come back up, but they were long-term fights where the ascendants and descendants of particular abilities, strengths, classes made a difference. This is back when PvE and PvP had more similarity to each other. You had to pay attention to what was going on in the field because depending on not just your positioning and not just your class abilities, but what phase of the fight you were in that happened by itself. Blizzard didn't design this as like, we're going to have multiple phases of PvP. It just happened naturally as an extension of longer lasting fights. That's what players remember who are veterans of this game, and that's how players learn to make the most of their tool set. They knew they had the time to be able to either make a huge difference or really screw up and blow it for their team and have to deal with that outside of a 6 or 7 second fight. And no bracket in today's game features that. Everything dies in seconds.
Let me ask you this then, Rise. There's been something I saw as far as shooting the wad is concerned, where they're going to be seriously looking at CCs and seeing on how to kind of change them, readjust them, balance. I'm not sure exactly, but they are going to be taking a look. And if you think back to older WoW, there wasn't such an insane number of CC available to every class. It almost seemed like CC was more class or even more so spec specific.
Yes, it was. Absolutely it was.
So like the example you used where you're having your different phases of a fight where range will start off at the advantage. If melee is able to close the gap, melee gains the advantage. Do you think that maybe that's changed where, well, does range have the advantage? Because melee has so many ways to negate that ranged advantage that they can just kind of get in there anyway? Or do you think some of that still maintains?
I think Blizzard has done a really good job about being able to provide a lot of classes and specs, balances and counterbalances for the abilities that they share and use against each other. That's a strong point of World of Warcraft. It remains to this day. But one of the weird crescendos, the arms race, the internal game dynamics arms races that have happened in WoW, is that ever since we saw stats inflation, and ever since Blizzard tried to put band-aids on to help mitigate the stats inflation, and those stats, the mitigation includes resilience, it includes battle fatigue, and it also includes, as far as the dynamics goes, CCs. If you're going to find additional ways to keep the damage and healing under control, then to create fun opportunities, you need to blank characters out of the playfield for a while, 6, 7 seconds at a time. That you don't want to be the whole fight, but you need to be able to give people the tools to open up opportunities. The problem with that is that you get into this spiral where if you're going to do that, then the counterbalance to that is to have some tools built in to be able to survive a little longer. And now you get into a game as opposed to a power balance where it kind of oscillates back and forth. Because players are good at min-maxing, it's suddenly turned into a thing where whoever's better at keeping players locked down, which is to say chaining the CCs. That's what this game's really about. You want to get better at PvP, you chain CCs, which is remarkably like PvE in some ways, where you need to coordinate with your team and communicate with your team and read with your team when to be able to spend CCs on what. And frankly, whoever does that better is going to win a fight. That's okay for fun, I guess, but there's a ceiling for fun there because now you have this weird synchronized dance where whoever does the dance wins the game, wins the battle. If you dial that back, and I think that's what they're trying to do in WoD, and say, yeah, you can have CCs. Those are fun. They make a difference, but they need to be on a cooldown where it's the big move. And either the big move works or it doesn't work, and now the other team surges and you have to counter their big move. That kind of back and forth surge is what I think WoD's trying to get back to. So to answer your question, no, I think that WoW's done a good job being able to give balances and counterbalances and abilities, and I don't think that CCs necessarily are going to make things go out of control, but they do need to be dialed back so that the opportunity for other abilities comes through. Did that make sense?
It did, but I mean, how do they go about dialing that back now that they've gone so far down this road?
The only way I know of is to do it all at once. I think that for all the talk that started about item level squish a few months ago, in disguise, and I'm not sure this was intentional, but I think Blizzard took a really hard look, and Blizzard in some ways is smarter than people that give them credit for. They understood the hole they got into. They understood how they built this awesome second floor, and realized, you know what, I can see through the floorboards down there. We got some problems going on.
Yeah,
down
like, it's
first.
not intentional. Like, we have a pool underneath, or we have this hot new nightclub where you have that kind of weirdly stained glass we can sort of see through, but not really, because you don't want people looking up, because that's just an awkward situation for everybody.
Yeah, this was a crescendo of issues that finally reached a head, and while I don't know why it took this long to get there, or why it wouldn't take longer than this to get fixed, I don't know. We'll see it when Warlords of Draenor appears. But this isn't something that you can just unravel one thing and get to the rest of it, and they know that. The number one mantra we hear from Blizzard is, we'll take care of this in the expansion. It's going to be too big a deal to do in the middle of an expansion. Everything has to get dialed back. They have to do the resilience dialed down. They have to do the battle fatigue dialed down. They have to do the CC changes. All these things affect each other at once, which is how they grew to this place. The item leveled out of control, all of that has to go back as one. You want to get it back to TBC levels, to get it down to any kind of sanity, it has to go as one. And that's how you do it.
You know, there's a lot of things I liked about PvP way back in the day where we walked uphill to queue into the Battleground, is when we walked back to our city of choice. I guess in those days it was Ironforge. But I also do enjoy the mobility that's offered in the current game. But with that mobility that's offered, with so many classes, like, say, Chamois, they went from being a turret to kind of a mobile howitzer, where they get the right procs, shit goes boom. And I'm not sure if the player base as a whole would be willing to give up those really awesome lava burst procs, those lightning bolts on the move, that fulmination, all these things that can happen while either moving or instantly. And the CC, I feel, has almost been a direct reflection of that. Or if there's going to be so many ways, or maybe it should be the opposite, where all of that CC has influenced the amount of mobility that's been given to all of the different classes. How does that get balanced out so you don't take this new feel that Blizzard's given to classes, using, say, Ellie as an example, but sort of rein it back in so it's not quite so insane?
That's a great question, and I think the answer lies in two places, actually. It lies with the current expansion, and it lies with the state of PvP that I saw when I first started back in TBC, which is a weird connection to draw. Back in TBC, you learned as a class, as a hunter, once you got, and it's not true now, but it used to be that once someone got inside range, you couldn't shoot them. There was a minimum range that they had to be in.
It's called macroing Raptor Strike in with Wing Clip. And you were fine, and then you just worked out your jump shot, you timed it with your auto shot timer, and you went jump, stop, shoot, raptor clip, jump, shot, stoop, and keep going.
You had to figure that out. That was one of the features of your class as a hunter. Meanwhile, as a mage, there were spots where whether you were pushing hard on O or covering for D, there were times that you had a couple of instances, but you had a lot of casting stuff. There were times that you used, and Chamois were like this too, where you used your instance on the fly, your instant cast abilities on the fly, which is to say you were moving, you were changing your positions while you were casting, and you intended that so that you got to a better spot where you could plant and start howitzering. That was a feature of a couple different casters. The same way that Chamois were exactly what you said. Stand and cast, and holy crap, Ghost Wolf off somewhere else, then pop up and stand and cast. That decision of, can I afford to not heal my teammates for 4 seconds? Versus, if I wait 4 seconds and get those heals off, is the rogue going to close on me, and am I going to be screwed for the next 10 seconds after that until I can get out of that mess? Those decisions made a difference for a Chamois. They made a difference for a druid who was much more mobile, but didn't have the throughput that a Chamois had. Versus a priest who had some decent mobility and could put bubbles on people. But
that actually, you using the druid as that makes me think of something else. And I may just be looking at this through the goggles of time and nostalgia taints all things, and anyone who thinks otherwise hasn't really thought about their past that much. But it seemed like there used to be a time where if you got something that was awesome, you paid for it with something else.
Yes.
At least to me, in the leveling experience, there are some classes that get a whole lot of this. Like, yeah, I ain't gotta give shit for it. I'm good. They know me. My taps, my credit just lasts until about level 80. We're fine. And that's no way, in harkening back to what we're saying, like how to increase or how to improve the PvP experience, let people know that for every positive, there's a little bit of negative. And you're not going to realize this for dozens of levels, but you're going to get to a point where, oh, you're a prot, you can take a lot of damage? Yeah, I'm sorry, you're not going to be doing any. Into a prot leveling, that is a very harsh reality.
Yeah. TBC did such a good job with class distinction, and I think they did. I think they really showed that trade-off really well. One of the things that I think MOP does really well, and it's kind of the summation of the crescendo of the evolution of WoW at this point, is MOP is so much better about making abilities stand out. People like to say, well, I miss the ability to customize my class a certain way. I miss my 31-point talent trees where I could choose this and that. That's a legit concern. But there was an awful lot of filler back then. Alright, let's put it where it is. A lot of filler. Buffs and things that we do that we take for granted now as part of your class, which needed to be taken for granted, were stuff that you quote-unquote earned. Earning 2% extra spell healing on this one ability because you could spend that talent point at level 32, that is not exciting. Blizzard's done a really good job at de-bullshitizing a lot of this game. That is what MOP brings to the table. But we've lost a lot of this class distinction stuff. So I think to answer your question, I'm going to bring up Don't Even. He mentions like one of the best things that could help the leveling experience as far as PvP is just line up the abilities that characters get at different places. Yes, all the different classes have things that make them stand out that are unique. But if you're going to give one class a CC that they need to learn at level 28, give everybody the CC at 28 who gets a CC. It's not going to match up. I'm so
angry I didn't bring this up earlier. That's possibly one of the most important, if not the most important thing.
Sync up the leveling trees. Sync it up with all the classes. Now, of course, it's not going to match up between healer or DPS or tank, but between the tanks, between the DPS, between the healers, if you want to help players learn this game, and if you want to make PvP better in this game, have everybody learn the same stuff at the same time that applies to their class, because not only will they start to see the similarities between what they're doing, but they will also learn the important individual differences for their particular class and spec, because they'll see the people around them using them in sometimes the same ways and in other times different ways, depending on what their class is. That is the best way that they could immediately help PvP and World of Warcraft overall in this game. It's a great idea that Don't Even came up with.
What sense does it make that the only two classes that get a dispel by level 20 are a Pally and a Chamois?
Why?
As a healer, what non-healing ability is more important than a dispel?
Right.
Why should that not be? It should be, oh, you hit level 10, you can choose your spec. Yes, you get your detox or whatever. Actually, you don't, but let's pretend you do. Mm-hmm. It should be there. It should be, oh, I'm going to be a Mistweaver. Guess what you get now? Detox. Learn it. We're going to force feed a 15 taco quest line down your throat so you know what detox does and how it works. And more importantly, how you can use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would make a tremendous quality of life difference in this game. And while there's certainly other ones that would, I think, make at least as much of a big of an impact, that one alone, that doesn't even need to wait for an expansion. Of course, they'll do it then, that makes sense. But that's just to me, a common sense one that would make a huge difference.
It really would. And I'm gonna just start getting angry now. Let's try to keep it light.
Yep.
Why the hell you hit your quest and you get detox, you're a mistweaver, you get whatever for each class, you get purge for your classes, dispels, whatever. Why not just have one quest where there's one difference between you living or dying?
Yeah.
This dude's about to cast the Armageddon of all fireballs. There's going to be a Balrog infused with Gandalf that has Dumbledore channeling in some extra mojo to make sure this shit hurts.
There will be some graphics. Your machine will start dropping frames.
Right.
In case you didn't notice.
If you don't purge the Sauron buff coming with it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
But if you just purge that Sauron buff, you're fine. Or if you got a buddy and he's got some evil like debuff on him, all you have to do is hit that button. It's all good. You complete the quest, you're good to go. You're aware of how important that ability is. And while it doesn't necessitate you're using it in a BG, it will at the very least help reinforce the importance of said ability.
So many opportunities for that kind of thing. And Blizzard, to their credit, have started down that road with Proving Grounds. They've made some progress in being able to show players how to do that, but Proving Grounds is tucked away. So I think Proving Grounds is a great thing, but that whole approach to this game, making a Proving Grounds approach to the questing, to the PvP stuff, maybe not so much the PvP, but the being able to approach World of Warcraft as a whole as Proving Grounds, which Blizzard has done in other games. A lot of the structure of other games Blizzard makes is Proving Ground style, where you basically tutorial your way through this quest or through this particular part of the game, and then you learn to play better because of it. That will benefit WoW tremendously, and Blizzard is particularly good at that.
I think we've been talking for over an hour at this point, so let's try and bring this to the bow moment. If you could boil it down, not to one thing, but to one, say, statement, how do you think PvP could be improved in World of Warcraft?
World of Warcraft, to this day, did a tremendous job in giving players all kinds of interesting choices and opportunities in PvP. You want to make PvP better in this game? Restore the aspects that make the choices and opportunities transparent to the players, not hidden away like hit rating or some weird filler buff that no one understands as to why I have 30% extra stamina, or why particular abilities work in a certain way. Make it transparent, and make players feel like they are accountable for the progress that they do or don't make in a particular fight. Whether it's in World PvP, whether it's in Battlegrounds, whether it's in the duels. Make it so that they're accountable, so they can feel the effects of them doing something well or them doing something badly. You do that, and not only will players get better at the game, but far more importantly, they will have a ton more fun, both by themselves and playing with each other.
You know what? That's something that in all of our things of what's wrong, what's right, what could be better, really what it comes down to is fun. And if people aren't enjoying it, then it's really all for naught. I think that goes back to saying re-incentivizing or retabulating the scoreboard will directly influence what players find fun. Because right now the scoreboard says if you kill a lot of people, you get a lot of damage, or you get a lot of heals, you're the best.
Yeah.
And everyone likes to be the best. So through re-incentivizing the scoreboard, well, I don't want that to be, say, my bow per se. That could be one of the most significant things that they do. But what I do think is the most important thing is to stop ignoring what every single person experiences on their way to what Blizzard actually wants to play. Because it doesn't matter XP off or leveling. If you don't know what your class can do, how in the hell can you ever actually play that class?
Absolutely. It's, I think, a misnomer in some ways that people think that World of Warcraft has gone to the dogs and it's a piece of crap game or something like that. Clearly, players are having a lot of fun still playing it. And I'm one of them. There's a lot of fun still to be had in this game. Both as players and World of Warcraft as a game shouldn't settle for that. You can have the fun that you have now, but reveal more of the game. Make it more intuitive, make it more obvious, and you can have even more fun. That, I think, to me, that's my bow right there. It's not that this game is bad. The game is a ton of fun still. It really is. And listen to how passionate players are arguing about the parts that they have.
Hell, listen to how ridiculous we've gotten this whole podcast.
It's because we love this game. Take the opportunity that all the players see, and thankfully that the developers see, to make this game much more fun. You've already got a great second floor. Go back, reset your foundation, go make a difference in there, so that by the time you walk up to the second floor, you are ready to party.
Yeah, if you want people to have fun, make sure they know how to do it. Because otherwise, they're just going to be running around like chickens who just had their heads cut off. And they got 30 seconds till they keel over, and that warrior shield slams them, and it's game over.
And they don't even know what they missed out on.
No. So let's wrap that up then.
Yep.
On that, they don't even know what they missed out on.
But they could.
Check us out at Twitter, at YoWowPvP. You know the site, Twinking.net. I would like to thank Kilroy KT, that's at Twitter, and the incredibly vowel-filled Poical Satin for bringing this to my attention. Yeah. Another conversation with Yoube. This is Youbeezy and my good friend.
See you on the field.
I was going to ask you to say Rise, but that's fine. That was Rise. We'll all see you on the field. We'll catch y'all next week, guys.